SportsNite, your home for all SU sports talk.
Syracuse players, they don't find a player box out. They turn around and try to jump up and grab the ball. That's not rebounding. That's not boxing out. That's lazy. It is nowhere close to an overreaction to say that they can go 500 or better in ACC play.
I think there's something to be said about that specific phenomenon. 5 guys saying there's no backup plan. It's just us.
Breaking down everything from around the hill.
When you get doubled up on your shots and even one more to put a cherry on top, there's no possible way you can win a lacrosse game.
You can tell it just dissipates out of nowhere. And it's the in-game adjustments that have hurt Syracuse.
And giving hot takes along the way.
Naheem McLeod, they want him to be Jesse Edwards, and he just isn't.
Fran Brown is a home run hire for Syracuse.
Get your voice heard by calling in at 315-443-2011 or interact with us on social media at WAER Sports Talk. It's Sports Night, and it starts right now.
Hello and welcome into Sports Night here on this Friday night, Friday the 13th in our Ostrom Avenue studios. Ryan Bridges with me. I'm Hudson Ridley. Ryan, bit of a spooky day today.
Yeah, not the best things come out of this day.
Did you notice anything unusual today on Sports Night or before Sports Night?
No.
No,
it was a
nothing
great day
unusual?
in Syracuse. Weather was beautiful. I wore a hoodie out the house. It was a little hot, but we recovered from there.
Hopefully we continue to have good things happen today only. Because anything good is happening with Syracuse football. Everything that has been good this season with Syracuse football just keeps getting amplified week by week. And now on this bye week, Ryan, we have so much to talk about in terms of this team. And especially Kyle McCord. He's been fantastic through this start of the season, particularly on the passing game and the throws downfield, medium and deep throws. He has been spectacular. If there's anything you've seen from Kyle McCord that you want to call in and talk about, you can. 315-443-2011. Or you can text us, 315-556-3929. And now, if you're watching this on YouTube, we are on YouTube here on Sports Night. So you can watch. If you're not watching on YouTube and say you want to, you can at WAER Sports Talk. But again, I want to circle back to Kyle McCord. A fantastic start to the season. A little bit of Heisman buzz already. I mean, what have you seen from him?
I mean, I've seen a guy that's making pro-level reads. He's getting the reins to the offense, right? Like Jeff Nixon comes in, who was in the NFL for a long time. He's installed a pro-style offense, and they're allowing Kyle to make decisions not just pre-snap, but also after the ball is snapped. One thing that I thought was really interesting, the first touchdown pass that he threw to Trevor Pena, he got a question about it in the press conference, and he said, "We hadn't thrown that look all week." What does that tell me? That tells me that there's a guy under center that is making decisions on the fly. He knows what the play is supposed to be for, but he knows how to make adjustments, and he knows who the most open guy is in that moment. And I think that's a decision-making aspect that we haven't seen from a Syracuse quarterback in a long time.
And you talked about that pro-style offense, too. I think that's been such a massive lift for Kyle McCord. If you watch McCord, a lot of the throws that he makes for touchdowns, it's his first read that he's going to. And, if his first read is Aronde Gadsden or this year Trevor Pena, right. I mean, that's a pretty easy read to make because they've been so good to start the season. But a lot of it has been he knows on this play, okay, we've dialed this up so many times. We've practiced this so many times. And yes, maybe I'll have to make a second read. But I trust that my receivers are so good, and I trust my accuracy and placement that I'll be completely fine no matter where I throw this ball. And every time it's really been to that first option. But it's been great. That's not a knock on him necessarily.
But the one word that you didn't use that I think is the most important in this is timing. Right? He knows right when these guys are going to cut. He knows right when they're going to break. And he knows right when he's supposed to throw the ball. That's so key because if he holds the ball for a little bit longer in some situations, then the window closes, then the defense collapses, then the pocket starts to shift. He is so on time with everything that he's supposed to do. And the level of preparation, that's what he's also credited Jeff Nixon for. The level of preparation has went up from where he even was at Ohio State. And I think he was doing things like this at Ohio State, but he wasn't able to truly show how much he can take command of the offense and how much of it can be about him, right? And everyone was like, oh, it's Marvin Harrison Jr., I get it. There's great receivers at Ohio State, but he is throwing guys open here at Syracuse, and he is making Trevor Pena, Aronde Gadsden way better than, even they were or what we perceived them to be heading into this year.
Exactly. I mean, in the first 2 games, he's thrown to 8 different receivers in both of those games. So I think it's been a really good showing from him so far this season in terms of, like you said, the timing. And, when he comes from a really timing-based offense in Ohio State, which is really what that Ryan Day offense has been. It's a lot of timing-based things. When he comes in and then also brings the experience that he has, and I don't know if you watched some of that ACC Network All Access this summer, but
I took a peek at it. Yes.
It was great. And what Fran Brown said in that documentary, that special about what Kyle McCord has done, he's another coach. That's what's so important about Kyle McCord. He's really become another coach, and that's taken his game to another level. I mean, 735 passing yards. That's now 4th in the FBS. 8 touchdowns is now 2nd in the FBS. And just earlier in the week, before an extra game was played by Texas State, that was 3rd and 1st, respectively. So I think what he's done this year, I mean, it may be worthy of being in that Heisman conversation, maybe?
I don't want to say things like that.
It's very early, yes. It's very early.
The guys who are at those big SEC, Big Ten schools, right, they're going to have the better competition to go up against, and they're going to have the narrative, right? So he's got to make sure that he performs really well when they go to NC State, when they play Miami. When they play these better teams in the ACC later in the year, that's where he really has to shine, especially if he wants to get NFL attention. I mean, they're going to look at this stuff and they're going to say it's great, but a Syracuse quarterback hasn't been drafted since, Ryan Nassib in 2012.
Exactly.
They've only had 3 quarterbacks drafted ever. One of them was Donovan McNabb, and then the other was Don McPherson. So
that's a very high bar.
It's a high bar, but it's one that he has hit. His play has justified every single thing and every single piece of hype that has come out of this.
Yeah,
and
it has.
I think a lot of it has to do to the offensive line and how well they've played, right? They've also put more blockers, I think, in that blocking game, because when you have a guy like Kyle McCord who can make decisions, right, better than almost any quarterback, right, in college football right now, you can just put 4 receivers outside. You can have Rondé Gadsden come in as a blocker. You can have LaQuint Allen come in as a blocker, and then Kyle McCord is sitting back there, and he's got 4 or 5 seconds to make a decision. I mean, he is going to pick you apart if that's what you're going to give him.
He really is. He's a very smart quarterback, and I think a lot of what people looked at with Kyle McCord coming into this year, obviously you look at Ohio State, you say, well, if Ohio State fans really hated him this much, maybe there's a kernel of truth to that. And now Ohio State fans, I've seen a lot of them apologizing and saying, well, we're a little too harsh on you. When your head coach does not have confidence in you, like Ryan Day did not have confidence in Kyle McCord, it can really hurt him. But you've seen this year what Fran Brown has done. Fran Brown has so much confidence in Kyle McCord, and for good reason. I mean, you've seen what he's done through these first 2 weeks, those 8 passing touchdowns.
What he said is important.
Yes.
Every single practice in the offseason, Fran Brown, who was the best player out there? Oh, yeah, it was Kyle McCord.
Kyle McCord. Every day it was Kyle McCord.
Kyle McCord, Fadil Diggs, Arande. Like, he said the same names. Like, he wasn't, like, trying to say, oh, well, this guy's really stepped up better. It's like, who's the best player? Yeah, it was Kyle McCord.
He believes in his leaders. And, I mean, that's incredibly important with a guy like Kyle McCord. And they talked about a lot in the offseason and then a little bit last week, this idea of Kyle McCord being Little League Kyle, as they call it. They call it Little League Kyle because so much of the pressure and stress that was on him at Ohio State clearly weighed on him a lot. And then he comes out here, and he described it himself. He said it's just playing ball. He's coming out here, he's playing ball, he's playing with his friends like it's Little League again, not being afraid to make mistakes, and when he does, wipe those mistakes quickly. Because that's not something he got to do at Ohio State. If he made a mistake, it was so scrutinous, he was so under a magnifying glass, that if he made a mistake, it was a massive, massive problem, the way Ohio State looked at it. Because, yeah, he's not C.J. Stroud. Very few people are C.J. Stroud.
Yes. Very few people in the NFL are C.J. Stroud.
Exactly. Very few people in the NFL are C.J. Stroud. But Kyle McCord, in his own right, has been truly, truly tremendous. If you have opinions on what you've seen from Kyle McCord so far this year, please call in 315-443-2011, or you can tweet at us at WAER Sports Talk, or is it X at us? I guess you can do either.
You can do whatever you want.
That would make sense. Kyle McCord, though, he's nothing without his receivers. You talked a little bit about his O-line. The receivers, though, are a big part of what he's done. So far, Trevor Pena has been terrific right now. 5 total touchdowns on the year, 4 receiving and 1 rushing. He had 1 in the first 27 games he played with the Orange. So it's a pretty big,
crazy
exactly. It's a massive step up for Trevor Pena. Right now, he's been the wide receiver 1, but it kind of makes you think, as teams start to put a little bit more attention on him, do you think he's going to stick as the wide receiver 1? Who do you see really as the best receiver on this team?
So best pass catcher? Are we throwing Rondé Gadsden in this conversation?
No. Best wide receiver. Because if you throw Gadsden in the conversation, there's no conversation.
I mean, it's Trevor Pena. Or Trevor Pena, sorry. It's Trevor Pena. This is not really a debate. There is not going to be... Jackson Meeks is not going to come out here and have 5 touchdowns in 2 games at any point in this season. I feel very confident saying that. Zeed Haynes, I really like him, right? But they need a lot of creative ways to get him the football. But you see Trevor Pena in the biggest moments. When they get down there in the red zone, it doesn't matter that he's a small guy. He runs his routes so crisply. He knows where to be at the right time. They have the timing on 3rd down. That's where Kyle is looking. On 3rd down, he's looking at Rondé Gadsden as well. But if we're just talking pure receivers, Pena has established himself as the wide receiver 1. Now, they go a little further. Teams are going to start to take Trevor Pena, Rondé Gadsden away, right? You're going to need Zeed Haynes to have 5 catches and like 70 yards if you want to beat a Miami. If you want to beat an NC State on the road, you need to be able to have other receivers who can step up. So the wide receiver 1 on any given week could be anybody.
Yeah.
But by season-long projection, I think Trevor Pena has firmly earned that.
I agree with you that right now, I would say he's the wide receiver 1. I mean, he's had a great 2 weeks, but I think, if you look at what Syracuse has done on offense in those 2 weeks, the looks that they've gotten Pena, the red zone targets that they've gotten Pena, I mean, you see that week 1 against Ohio, and then if you're Georgia Tech, you go, okay, well, that's only 1 week of film. We don't know if they're actually going to go back to Trevor Pena. Now, it's happened 2 times. He's in the national conversation. I mean, the most receiving touchdowns in FBS, 4 of them. He's got 5 total. So if you see that as a red zone threat, then all of a sudden, if you're the defensive coordinator of Stanford, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, or really any team down the line, you'll see that production in the first 2 weeks, and you'll go, well, I don't really know if that's a guy that we can leave single covered all the time, or a guy that, we can just allow to float through zones. They can't do that. But a guy like maybe Zeed Haynes, that's where he can step up. Once they start to take away Pena, I think Zeed Haynes is the most talented receiver on this team. I mean, it's a Georgia transfer, but it's not just about him transferring from Georgia, because there's plenty of players on this team last year that were better than some of the backups that Georgia had. So I think it's not just about him coming from Georgia. His ball skills are great. His route running is excellent. His speed is tremendous. And his durability is fantastic. That's something we haven't talked about with Zeed Haynes in a discussion. I mean, he takes a lot of big hits for a guy that is, not the biggest built. A lot of his routes are crosser routes. But he has that durability to last the full season, plus that route running ability and that just blazing speed. I think Zeed Haynes will be the guy to step up and really, not take over for Pena down the stretch. Because
but you
Pena's
think he could
compete
compete with him in terms of targets and catches?
100%. Once you start to get to, those later games in the year, Virginia Tech and Boston College, I think longer down the line, that's when we're going to see him step up.
But where do you see that number 1 corner going, right? Because Trevor Pena is operating in a lot of the slot. If you're looking at Rondé Gadsden, I mean, he's operating sometimes on the line, also in the slot. Zeed Haynes is the outside guy. So it's really weird how teams are going to cover the orange because, Zeed Haynes can operate as that, technically an X or a guy that's going to line up on the outside. But we see a lot of this in the NFL too. I mean, the best receivers are all moving to the slot because guys are just finding ways to get open in the middle of the field.
And I truly think, I'm not saying that Trevor Pena will move to any kind of X receiver. I would think that longer down the line, it could be Jackson Meeks that ends up taking that spot. I mean, he's your best jump ball threat that you have right now outside of Rondé Gadsden because, of course, Damian Alford is no longer here. So that's the best jump ball threat that you have in Jackson Meeks. I think Zeed Haynes could move further inside. I mean, it's a really interesting discussion right now because we don't really know where this offense will be in a couple weeks. We don't know how the defenses will play against them and try to limit them because you have to adjust week to week. But as you go down the line, I just think Zeed Haynes has so much potential to break out this year because of, his route tree could improve. That's really the only thing, but he has so much speed. Do you really need that good of a route tree against some of the ACC competition?
We haven't really seen them take a top off a defense yet.
That one play to Jackson Meeks against Ohio was really the extent of trying to beat them over the top.
Sure.
But that's not what the game of this team is, though.
No.
That's not what this team will
And
do.
Kyle McCord's arm is better in the short to intermediate.
Exactly. I mean, he has, I'm sure his deep ball is great. The throw that he had to Jackson Meeks was just a beautiful,
It was a
beautiful
great catch,
ball.
too.
Great catch, laid out and made the grab. But I just don't know if they will ever take the top off the defense because what they've been doing right now has been so successful.
That one interception that Kyle McCord has, it was on that jump ball that he threw to Umari Hatcher, where he kind of was scrambling out of the pocket, and he already had 4 touchdowns on the day. So, I mean, he was feeling himself. And I don't blame him. But if Fran Brown said it after the game, like, Umari Hatcher just got out-competed for that football.
He did. There's not a lot of jump ball guys on this team, but it really has not mattered to the offense. Syracuse 2-0 right now and starting to kind of creep into that national conversation, getting votes. The offense has been great, but on the other side of the ball, it's been a little wishy-washy at times. That defense has been not great at stopping the run one week, not the best at stopping the pass the next week, and then the special teams hasn't been that great either. But Ryan, there's something I really want to highlight on this defense.
I know where you're going.
That I noticed. So a lot of what we saw last Saturday against Georgia Tech, or a lot of what we thought at least going in, was how is this team going to replace Marlowe Wax? Marlowe Wax is such a big deal to what this team does. You don't really have a guy, I mean, Justin Barron's great, but he has to play a different role. Derek McDonald is good, but the sideline-to-sideline speed might not be the best, so who are you going to replace him with? Well, Fran Brown and defensive coordinator Elijah Robinson opt to take kind of a different approach and move Fadil Diggs from an edge rusher to a linebacker, and it turned out great. He had a couple tackles for loss. He had 7 total tackles. I mean, he was flying all over the place. Fran Brown, I mean, you could not have made a better decision, and he talked about it after the postgame. We have the sound here.
Coach E is really brilliant when it comes to thinking, and we know they haven't faced that. We know they didn't practice against that, and we also felt as though Fadil was athletic enough, and he's big. So it was a difference when most guys are getting hit by a 230-pound linebacker, but now you're getting hit by a 6'5", 265 who likes contact. So that's the part of it that was why we went and did that. And we knew Haynes knew him. They were at Texas A&M together. So it was like Haynes looking across, you know who he is. So now you go tell them like, oh snap. He probably didn't say that. He probably, oh snap, they got Fadil here. It's a difference looking at Fadil, especially when you lose Marlowe Wax.
Isn't that just so terrific to hear, that kind of in-depth thinking of not just, okay, he has the size and the speed, we can move him and be experimental and move him from an edge rusher after being a good edge rusher in Texas A&M, and then going to the ACC, you'd think you'd want that pressure off the edge, but no. We'll move him to the second level. We'll move him to an inside linebacker spot. It turned out great. And then also talking about how he knew Jamal Haynes, the Georgia Tech running back, because they played together at Texas A&M, and knowing that Jamal Haynes was going to fear going up the middle against Fadil Diggs. I mean, Ryan, they held them, or the running backs at least, to under 50 yards rushing on that game, a team that came in top 10 in rushing. That change was insane. I mean, that was such a good change.
It was a great change. I mean, Fran Brown, these are the types of things that he can do during a week, right? He knows what buttons to press at the right times. He knows how to, fix things. Exactly. And Dino Babers couldn't really do this as much, and that's why you would see, the 6-game, the 5-game losing streaks that this team would just randomly go on after starting the season so hot, because you just get figured out as a team, and they just didn't have either the depth because of injury, or they didn't have, the coaches who could, move the pieces around within the offense. Like, a lot of these players were here, right? But they don't know what buttons to press, and they have more versatility across everybody because they brought in new transfers, and they have so many good young guys that they've also brought in as well. And so Fran Brown, from a personnel perspective, is really doing so much. I mean, they even had Justin Barron dropping down into the middle a little bit more. They had Elijah Clark roaming in the middle of the field. And I think a lot of that also was, limiting Haynes King. Like, that's a running quarterback, and so you want him to throw the ball more rather than use his legs. It didn't work great. He still got out for 2 touchdowns, but still, they forced him to throw the ball more on key downs and key situations. And having a guy like Fadil Diggs running around there, you mentioned it plugs up the run.
And just like Fran Brown did, you also have to credit Elijah Robinson, too. I mean, Robinson, what he did, defensive adjustments from week 1 to week 2 where you saw Anthony Tyus, shout out to my favorite Northwestern Wildcats where he transferred from, Anthony Tyus, who was not very good at Northwestern from what I remember, became a world beater on the ground against Syracuse and finished that week top 5 in the nation in rushing yards in that week. And you thought, oh boy, you're going against Georgia Tech, a team that ran the ball well against Florida State, crushed them. Ran the ball well against Georgia State, crushed them. I mean, or at least crushed them on the ground. Score-wise in both of those, it was a little closer than maybe Georgia Tech would have liked. But still, I mean, that was a team that hammered the ball through 2 weeks. Then you go to Syracuse for, well, I guess week 2 because they played in week 0.
Sure, 2 games.
2 games. They had played 2 games before that, but they go into their 3rd game against a team that got gashed on the ground, and Elijah Robinson was ready. Fadil Diggs played great. The interior defensive line was fantastic. Deion Wilson and Murad Watson, who no one has really talked about. Murad Watson, as a freshman, is really, really stepping up in the middle of that defense. I just thought they played so well this week. But, you know, Ryan, I think the adjustments have been good. But it just makes you wonder, down the line, can they keep adjusting week to week and play well? And if you have an opinion on that, you sure can. Call in 315-443-2011, or you can tweet at us at WAER Sports Talk. You can also text 315-556-3929. But again, can this defense adapt week to week?
Here's the thing, is I think they can adapt, but the end result still hasn't been there. The end result in terms of tackling still was not there. Like, Derek McDonald has a chance to wrap up Haynes King on that first Georgia Tech touchdown.
Yeah, he had him.
He lets them go. And I think he could have tripped over an offensive lineman or even a defensive lineman's like foot on his way down because, I mean, he comes right through the hole. His arms are wide as if he's going to get him just standing up. And then he sort of falls down. And then by the time he's like actually at Haynes King's feet, he misses. And then King, darts to the end zone. Derek McDonald also missed that little wrap-up tackle that they had in the 3rd quarter. Like, if they had better tackling, I think they could have slowed those Georgia Tech drives down, and then the game would have been so close at the end. So, I mean, I know the special teams was like a big point because they blocked a punt, they blocked a field
special
goal,
teams was not good.
The onside kick.
Yeah.
But they were able to move the ball down the field very easily, and a lot of that goes to the blocking scheme and plugging up the run and stuff like that. They didn't do that very well in the 4th quarter. They had it for 3 quarters. I don't think they did it very well in the 4th. So it's still a point of concern, but I think they're doing the most with what they've got.
The biggest concern right now for me, is some of those games that they play later in the year, especially against offenses that when we looked at the schedule and the outset at the beginning of the year, we went, oh boy, I mean, this is a cakewalk. NC State, NC State, who knows if NC State is even good, because in their 2 games, neither of them, they haven't looked any good in either game.
Sure.
But then you look at some offenses that we thought, oh, well, this will be a cakewalk. Syracuse will be great this year. You can roll right over them with your defense. UNLV this year has one of the most exciting offenses in the league. Boston College, Cal, Miami. I mean, all of those teams are like really big offensive threats, especially the one that concerns me the most, looking way down the line. Cal has one of the best running backs in the country. I mean, Jamal Haynes is good. Jalen Ott with Cal is tremendous. So that's where a lot of my concern lies. But I think overall, this team going forward is looking pretty good, I think, on both sides of the ball. Just needs some of those adjustments on defense and special teams. Well, they have a bye week this week, so nothing on this weekend, but we've got you covered all the way on Friday of next week. So next up, we'll have someone who knows probably more about Stanford than I know about anything in my entire life. It'll be one of our play-by-play broadcasters, Skylar Wilkes, on the other side. But don't go anywhere. Keep watching SportsNite here on YouTube and keep listening on WAER.
We know you've got a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it may not be easy to tune in at exactly the right time to catch WAER News. But WAER News is always available, wherever and whenever you are, without a paywall. Visit our website to use our live stream or catch up on local and national news, as well as podcasts on our website at WAER.org.
The Yale historian reflects on freedom in a new book.
We imagine that because we're exceptional, freedom is getting taken care of for us. And this is a huge mistake. Sorry if my voice is wavering a bit, but this is actually a rocket.
And takes cover while we talk about it. Timothy Snyder joins us from Kyiv. This and all the latest news Saturday and Weekend Edition from NPR News.
Saturday morning from 8 to 10 on WAER.
Hi, this is Tracy, Director of Membership and Development. You know, one of the things you can count on from WAER, we've got your back when it comes to reporting the news. And one of the things this station counts on to keep it all going, contributions. One way to help, donating a vehicle you no longer need. It's free to you, easy to do, and it could mean hundreds of dollars in support and hundreds of dollars in tax deductions. If you don't need it, donate it. Visit WAER.org to learn more. Thanks.
The Ostrom Avenue Podcast, breaking down Syracuse athletics.
The students rush the field. The Orange are bowl eligible and 6-0 for just the third time in the last 87 years.
And interviewing the industry's experts.
We are now joined by a very special guest. It's Emily Leiker of Syracuse.com.
Check out video interviews on YouTube at Ostrom Avenue Podcast and weekly episodes on WAER.org or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back into Sports Night here on WAER. Ryan Bridges and Hudson Ridley talking a little Syracuse football, a bye-week edition of Sports Night, where we're usually a Friday show previewing a Saturday game, a weekend game, but 1 week from today, Syracuse football taking on Stanford. And for more on the Cardinals side of things, we bring in our broadcaster of the game, Skylar Wilkes. Thanks for joining us, Skylar.
Yeah, happy to be here. Great to be on the air with both of you.
It's good to have you. I love your shirt today.
Oh, thank you.
Skylar, it's a nice
Hopefully
pattern.
the viewers on our YouTube like it as well.
Yes.
Funny you brought that up. You can turn it into us on WAER Sports Talk on YouTube and see who's talking to you on the radio. The radio feed will be up there as well, so you'll hear us perfectly clear on the YouTube side of things. If you want to join the conversation between the three of us, you can call in at 315-443-2011. You can always text us and submit a question via text. That's 315-556-3929. And we've got plenty of things for you guys to interact with on WAER Sports Talk on X. Skylar, let's get into Stanford real quick. I mean, first matchup for these teams in quite a bit. Stanford obviously joins the ACC as one of those brand new teams alongside Cal and SMU. They've had some struggles these past few seasons. A tough start to the year, a loss to TCU. They bounced back against Cal Poly. What have you seen from the Cardinals so far this year? Do you think they're better than they've been in the past?
Not really, to be honest. The team has good players, but they haven't looked as good recently, right? You know, TCU, they played close, and then Cal Poly, they ran away with. But if you just look at the stat sheet, they just don't have, besides wide receiver Alec Iomanor, they don't have really a defined running back. Micah Ford, a true freshman, is kind of assume the role of starting running back, but Ashton Daniels, the quarterback, he's more of a dual threat guy. There really isn't anyone besides Iomanor that stands out significantly for the Stanford offense.
Yeah, I think the thing with Iomanor is, too, I mean, he really does not have a quarterback throwing to him. I mean, Ashton Daniels, he's one of three that they've used, and Ashton Daniels seems to be the guy at this point, but, you know, it goes back to the old quote, if you have three quarterbacks, you have none. Is Ashton Davis good enough to make a dent in the Syracuse defense?
A dent, maybe like a small mark or a nick necessarily. I mean,
a scratch.
Yeah, a scratch is a good way to put it. This is not. I'm not trying to slight Ashton Daniels at all. He is a talented quarterback that can make you pay. You know, he's been efficient. 3 touchdowns to 1 reception. He has above a 60% completion percentage. So he has been solid. Like, he is not a bad quarterback by any means. But I think he's become too reliant on his legs. This is, like we mentioned, the wide receiving core is a bit thin. They don't have a true proven number one back. So Daniels has had to do a lot of the lifting with his legs. And it's been effective at some points, but, you know, they played an FCS team last week. It's hard to take that into account when you're putting them against Syracuse.
Mm-hmm. But Skylar, I would kind of argue that, you know, quarterbacks relying on their legs, that's going to work against Syracuse right now. We saw Haynes King break 2 touchdowns last week. Do you think he has more success against Syracuse, especially without Marlowe Wax? We've mentioned the tackling has been a problem. Do you think that's less of a concern in this game, or do you think Syracuse just continues to get better in that department?
It's definitely less of a concern because Ashton Daniels is less of a dangerous runner than Haynes King, and that's the biggest thing. You know, yes, Haynes King did break a few plays loose, score 2 touchdowns. Very impressive performance. I mean, he's definitely one of the best running quarterbacks in the country. But think about the storyline coming into that game. Was Georgia Tech was going to run all over Syracuse, really talented backfield of Haynes King and Jamal Haynes. Syracuse was, after being destroyed by Northwestern legend Anthony Tyus, they were going to be in bad shape.
Go Cats.
And that's the exact opposite of what happened. I mean, you look at the defense, the rushing yards, only 112 total from Georgia Tech, who ran free in their first 2 games of the year. So you bring in Georgia Tech, who you limited to a solid amount. I mean, you did the best you could to replace them with a worse rushing attack in Stanford. I don't see how Syracuse would struggle more against the Cardinal.
Skylar, I really agree with you. I don't really see any way that it could happen. My concern, and I know this is probably a little less of a concern because the only way where this guy was good was against Cal Poly, but Elijah Brown, if things kind of break down for Ashton Daniels, Elijah Brown last week, 7 for 7, 100 yards and a touchdown, and yes, it's against Cal Poly, but hey, Cal Poly is not a bad FCS team, so what do you think that if Ashton Davis goes down, what can people expect from Elijah Brown against Syracuse? Could he potentially do more?
I mean, the upside is exponential. I mean, Elijah Brown was one of the top quarterbacks, top 11 quarterback in the country this year, coming out of Mater Dei, which is known for its quarterback Bryce Young, JT Daniels, some really great quarterbacks that have come out of there. Went 42-2 in high school. He's a born winner. He's a very good quarterback, one of the top recruits in the country. So, yeah, I mean, I think it shouldn't be a surprise that he performed that well against Cal Poly. Ashton Daniels, I think, probably does a little bit more with his legs. Like I said, I mean, 17 carries, 87 total net yards against Cal Poly. But Elijah Brown is probably a better thrower. He's got more of whip on the ball. He's got better accuracy. And so if Daniels really starts to struggle, which I would be surprised if he did, just, he's a seasoned veteran at this point, his second straight year starting. If he struggles, then if you're Troy Taylor, you can feel really comfortable putting Elijah Brown in, despite, true freshman in the dome, loud crowd on a Friday night. I think you can really feel comfortable putting in Elijah Brown. I mean, as much as you'd like to see Justin Lamson play in his revenge game, I don't know if that's going to happen.
But is it enough of a competition right now where they're on the fence with both guys and they're thinking, okay, if this goes wrong, we really need this game
it's early
at
in the
Syracuse.
Season.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I don't know. Like, if it's a question whether Ashton Daniels is going to struggle with guys like Justin Barron and Elijah Clark and even Fadil Diggs roaming around, like, he's definitely going to struggle. I mean, Syracuse, you'd say there'd be like a 10-point favorite in this game, maybe 8?
I don't know necessarily what the
I haven't looked at the spread yet.
Well, I don't think it'd be out because it's a...
Well, Siri has an opinion on the spread, I guess, there.
Siri's trying to join SportsNite.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's a little bit too early in the season to know, like, okay, do we really have a quarterback controversy on our hands? And honestly, if I'm making the decisions on who I'm putting in, if Ashton Davis is really struggling and there's really nowhere else to go in that game, I'm not putting in Brown, in my opinion. I just feed Justin Lamson to the Wolves. Which, you know what, that might be a little sad. He's a former Syracuse guy, but that might actually be, the option if Davis is really struggling.
Well, he's become more of like I don't want to say Taysom Hill. I'm trying to think of, like, Iowa State had a quarterback a few years ago where it was just like a pure goal line situation. Like, if you need a few yards, you put him in. It's almost like a Dan Villari last year, Wildcat snap, and Lamson just takes it. That's kind of the role he's gotten.
A William the Refrigerator Perry, but just a lot lighter.
Right.
Exactly. Not a
defensive lineman.
Yeah, I remember the Eagles did that with Jalen Hurts like a few years ago, where they had like a starting quarterback, but then they also had Jalen Hurts. Like,
yes, exactly.
Just coming in like goal line situations.
Yeah, that's exactly like that. That's what it seems like they've started to use it as. But it's crazy that this Stanford team, right? They used to be one of the top teams in the country, almost top 25 every year. And I know you don't get Andrew Luck's all the time, but when David Shaw left, this program is really it was declining towards the end of his tenure there, but it's really gone downhill since his departure.
You're listening to Sports Night right now here on WAER. Ryan Bridges and Hudson Ridley from 8 to 9 p.m. And now we've been joined by Skylar Wilkes, our broadcaster of the game. That's happening in 1 week's time. Join us tonight. Come on, call in. 315-443-2011. You can also text us at 315-556-3929. Skylar, we've talked a lot about the Cardinal. I want to talk a little bit about SU. this has been a long time off for a team that's really rolling right now. Kyle McCord did talk about, okay, if there's going to be a lot of time off, how will SU respond? He was pretty confident on it. Let's hear what he had to say.
I think that's the mindset now. I feel like we have the players to do so. We have the coaches to do so. We have the scheme and all the hard work that we put in to get to this point. I think it's put us in a position to be confident. So I think just continuing that mindset on that it's about us, and it's not about who we play necessarily. It's about putting the best product of Syracuse football on the field.
Skylar will pose the same question that they posed to Kyle McCord in that press conference. Do you think the bye week helps or hurts SU?
Definitely hurts.
Yep.
You're just getting going, right? New coach, new almost everything. 2 wins in a row, including a ranked opponent at home. You don't want the momentum to stop. It's it's a game of momentum and a game of swings. It can be, and even though you're playing technically an inferior team, if you will, or you're the favorite team coming into this matchup, not playing for a week after you're already kind of gotten in rhythm, right? Like, it's really early in the season to have a bye week. And I'm not saying Syracuse will struggle automatically coming out, but there is a lot of risk.
No, you're exactly right. I think so too. You want to play until you lose. I mean, at that point, if you've been that good, you're executing that well, especially Kyle McCord himself, he's executing that well.
Or like you go have some crazy road, like if you came back from Cal, right? Like you could understand having 5-7 weeks in, okay.
Yeah.
But 2 weeks both at home, it doesn't really
But
make a
also
lot of
from
sense.
a health perspective, right? You want to go until your team's a little bit beaten up and stuff like that, and then you get that bye week right there. Mm-hmm. Other than the wax injury, I mean, this team is pretty fresh right now. They've had an entire offseason to rest, and now they're getting a long rest in the middle of the season. They're not in between these tough opponents yet where they need the extra prep. It's Stanford, it's Holy Cross coming up, so it's a poorly timed bye week.
They're fortunate that Stanford also had a bye week this week, because that could have been really costly if they were still playing, right? Maybe had picked up a win this week, and then you're playing a team that hasn't played in 2 weeks, and you just played 3 weeks in a row. That's the type of thing. It's hard to get back into the swing of things when you, right? Like all off season, you're training. Okay, 2 games in. Oh, now we're off for a week, and now we have to get back into the swing of things. That's a tough thing to ask, but if Syracuse has shown us anything, about change and about handling adversity, it seems like this team is capable of doing it. The energy Fran Brown has brought to the program, the success that he's brought, has shown a lot of promise and a lot of trust for fans.
Mm-hmm. I think it also hurts Syracuse. I mean, you mentioned this, Ryan, that having it at the beginning of the year, not when your team is banged up, not when they're tired, I mean, that hurts you a lot. When you start to get to games like, Miami at the end of the year or postseason play, this team is going to be exhausted by the time you get to Miami. That's the one concern about the bye. You have a bunch of home games at first. You have a bye really early on. It really doesn't give you anything, and then it just takes away. So I do think the bye, you're right, both of you guys, that it hurts Syracuse. But I also think that the further you go down the line, this team, they don't have a bye week to interrupt maybe potentially future success. Because if you look at it, if they get back on track against Stanford, I don't think the bye will kill you against Stanford, to be honest. You get back on track against Stanford, you start the train up again, get on track against Holy Cross or continue the train, you go into UNLV and you beat them. If you're 5-0 at that point, the bye will hurt later down the line when you're banged up. But right now, you can just keep that train moving right through the bye.
That's why, but right, it's all hypothetical, really.
Oh, yeah.
This team could come out and be on fire out of the bye. You just never know. But you'd hope that preparation really amounts to something. It's not like the Stanford offense is super dynamic, right? Like they don't have a lot of big-time playmakers. They have good players, just not big-time playmakers like a Rondé Gadsden. And so you hope that you wonder, really, does Troy Taylor and the Cardinal, do they throw out a different look? Is it, is Elijah Brown suddenly the starting quarterback? Like, there's so many questions that could come out of this game, right? You play an FCS opponent the week before, then you're on a bye. There's not much to scout off the Stanford team.
Mm. But also another, weird aspect of this, and I think no one's really bringing this up, is that Stanford is also coming off a bye. Like the Cal Poly game was on the 7th. This game is going to be on the 20th. Like they've also had 2 weeks off.
And it's not helpful for that either, right? You played TCU, okay, legitimate team, and then FCS, then bye.
Yeah.
That's not really
Then
conducive to
at
success.
Syracuse.
In
Right.
the Dome on a Friday night primetime slot?
That is not
For a team that's getting a lot of votes right now.
Yeah.
Right. That is not conducive necessarily to success. Like, you'd almost rather be, right, and I don't know about you, I'd probably rather be in Syracuse's spot where, yeah, you're coming off an early bye, not ideal, but you just beat a top 25 team, whereas Stanford just beat an FCS team coming off a bye.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big difference.
I'd much rather be in Syracuse's spot, unless that meant I went to Stanford. I think that'd probably be a pretty good thing for me, education-wise.
you're right.
I think that'd be a smart move, maybe to go to Stanford. But other than that, I don't think they really bring anything to the table. That right now, Syracuse can't beat from a football perspective.
Yeah, you'd like to think that. I mean, the quarterback, you look at it on paper, right, and McCord definitely has the advantage over Ashton Daniels. The only real thing is, Io Manor is one of the top receivers in the country. So I know Gadsden isn't really he's not really a receiver, although I tend to think that he is. They just label him as a tight end for the effect of it. I think that conversation of Io Manor and Gadsden is one to like. That is a really cool wide receiver or weapon matchup.
Who do you put on Io Manor if you're Elijah Robinson? That's a really tough because
really
there's no
good
true CB1 right now.
No, not at all. And because it's interesting, Devin Grant was an all-MAC safety at Buffalo. They moved him to corner. Deuce Chestnut was a corner. They moved him to safety. A lot of guys playing really out of position. I don't know. I just don't think you don't have someone follow him. You just play whoever is on that side plays him, because you, like you said, Hudson, you don't have a true cornerback one, and it's not worth risking someone who's unproven so far as a cornerback one to put up against a really good receiver like Io Manor.
I mean, I think you shift safeties, obviously. You make sure that there's more safety help on that side, and you make someone else beat you. I mean, that's what they did this past week, trying to take away the run game, out of Georgia Tech and make somebody else beat you. That was the key to that game. We've moved on to Stanford. We appreciate Skylar Wilkes giving us a lot of information on the Cardinal, a lot of information about where Syracuse is, their mindset after this bye week. 1 week from today here on WAER at 7:30, countdown to kickoff at 7. We'll have Syracuse and Stanford join us then. Skylar, thanks for joining us here on SportsNite. All right. When we come back, me and Hudson going to do a little fun game for the last block of the show. We're doing rankings, our 5 male and female best athletes playing at Syracuse Athletics right now. All that and more when SportsNite returns on WAER.
Last week on Wait, Hari Kondabolu told us why he loves the 2024 Chicago White Sox, the worst team in modern baseball history.
I love the fact they make regular people feel like they too could play Major League Baseball.
Yeah. I'm Peter Sagal. We won't just cover the presidential debate. We might ask comedian and impressionist Jay Farrow to just reenact it for us. Join us for the news quiz from NPR.
Saturday morning at 11 on 88.3 FM WAER.
We know you've got a lot to do in a day, and sometimes it may not be easy to tune in at exactly the right time to catch WAER News. But WAER News is always available, wherever and whenever you are, without a paywall. Visit our website to use our live stream or catch up on local and national news, as well as podcasts on our website at WAER.org. Delve into the rich tapestry of acoustic-led folk, roots, and Americana music as we welcome back Common Threads here on 88.3 FM WAER. Enjoy national and international acts as well as local artists every Sunday with host Pete Thomas. Whether you're seeking the comfort of timeless classics or contemporary gems and music discovery, don't miss Common Threads Sundays from 2 to 5 exclusively on 88.3 WAER, your local NPR station.
On the next Putumayo World Music Hour,
we'll travel from San Juan, Havana, and New York City to India, Scotland, and Russia, and demonstrate the influence of the popular Latin dance music salsa on musicians around the world. I'm Dan Storper.
And I'm Rosalie Howarth. Join us for Salsa, the next Putumayo World Music Hour.
Sunday night at 11 on WAER.
Hello and welcome back into SportsNite on WAER. We've made it through 2 segments of the show here. You've heard a lot about football, and I'm sure you might want to hear some more. We'll have a little bit for you, but it's not all going to be football. Hudson Ridley and Ryan Bridges here with you up until 9. So we got a quarter of an hour left to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, the other sports on campus, and specifically the other athletes on campus. You hear a lot about Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord, big name, of course. Why wouldn't you hear about Kyle McCord? Well, there's a lot of other players at Syracuse in different sports that have been carrying the loads. Ryan, we've both made top 5s list for men's and women's. I want to start with the men's side of things in your rankings as of right now. Let's go 5 to 1. I want to hear your 1 at the end. Actually, you know what? Yeah, we'll go both 5 to 1. So who's at your 5 spot right now for the athletes on campus?
Well, it is tough for the men's side of things because you've only got 2 active sports actually going right now. Mm-hmm. But I've got Chimere Omeze of the Masak team. I think, he's obviously got those 2 goals alongside somebody else you might hear a little bit later. I think he's been really good, and they've got, a good combination, for that team. They've been struggling a little bit, start of ACC play didn't go the way you wanted it to. Boston College is a game you probably won all 3 points. You have the loss to Lemoyne. The offense has been a little cool, but he's still been good enough in the games leading up to that.
You know what? I agree with the Omeze point too, and I think this men's soccer team is a little on the rocks from where they used to be. They've kind of fallen down the rankings and now out of the rankings. So
sure.
I think overall this is a team that really needs some of that help as we go forward. My number 5 player, also on the men's soccer team, Nicholas Kalukian, the star from last year. So far this year, 2 goals. It's tied for the team lead with Omeze. I think if you look at the overall of it, I think he beats Allen out by just a hair. In my opinion,
I had LaQuinn Allen around 6.
LaQuinn Allen is my number 6, and if they ran the ball more, I would agree. If you have LaQuinn Allen in your top 5 and you think I'm dumb or Ryan is dumb, you can call in and yell it at me. I don't know if you want to.
Give us your own top 5.
Yeah, please do. 315-443-2011, or if you don't feel like yelling at me to my face here on YouTube, you can watch us at WAER Sports Talk. You can just text it in at 315-556-3929. We do not bite at all. So that's your 5, both from the men's soccer team. Ryan, your 4?
I'm going with Fadil Diggs.
Okay.
And I don't know if I would have said this, maybe we made these rankings after the Ohio game, but what he did, filling in for linebacker with Marlo Wax out, being a roamer all over the field, 7 tackles, 2 for loss. He had that huge 4th down stop when it was, Syracuse up 10, 4th quarter. I don't know why Georgia Tech went for it, but Fadil Diggs was there to stop it, and it was all him. I mean, he timed it up perfectly. He smashed that right guard over. He wrapped up Anthony Carey, the backfield. Then they went out and scored a touchdown that made it 31-14. That could have been, that was the turning point in the game, in my opinion. It put it just out of reach for Georgia Tech, and I think Fadil Diggs really showed why he's the number 1 player on this defense for Syracuse.
He really is the marquee player on this team. You'll hear him on my rankings a little bit later. Right now in the 4th spot, I've got Trevor Pena. I think Trevor Pena, everything that he has done this year has been very inspirational. What he's done in terms of coming back from last year, his injuries or his owies, as Dino Babers seemed to call them every week when the question was asked about Trevor Pena. He really had a chip on his shoulder. That's what was said about him at the beginning of the season. Fran Brown talked about it. There's a chip on Trevor Pena's shoulder this year. He's got something to prove. Well, he has proved a lot so far. 5 total touchdowns after having 1 in his first 27 games. What he has done is special, and those 4 receiving touchdowns have been great. He always finds his way open in those soft zones that Ohio is playing and those soft zones that they were playing against Georgia Tech. I mean, he found his way through the defense, and you can credit that a lot to Jeff Nixon's system. But I've been highly, highly impressed with what I've seen.
And he's turned around all in one offseason. I think
he really
has. That's the craziest part to me is it was just Fran Brown and him talking about what he's got to do better in the offseason. He credits getting closer to God a lot more. He credits, his time management is a lot better.
Yeah.
He's sleeping a lot more. It's about the preparation. It's about the other things that he's putting into it. It's the hard work. It was always there for him. It's just great to see it all come together.
It's like that great Dino Babers quote from last year about Umari Hatcher. He changed his nightlife, and he changed his day life. Umari Hatcher, not in my top 5, but he's been off to a good start this season. Ryan, we've gone through 5 and 4. Again, my 5 was Nicholas Kalukian, my 4, Trevor Pena, your 5, Omeze, and your 4, Fadil Diggs. Who's your 3?
My 3, you actually already brought him up. It was Kalukian. For
Okay.
all the same reasons. He's that classic number 9 for this team. He's a great finisher. He's going to be there, and he was there last year too. Like I'm keeping perspective on, okay, who is the best athlete? Even if they don't have the craziest stats right now, we're very early in both, football and men's soccer seasons right now. So it's like, okay, who is the best player? I know Kalukian, even if the stats don't say it, he is the best player, and he will, rise up more as the season goes on.
Interesting you mention that, because right now I actually have flipped 5 and 3. I have Chime Omeze at 3.
Okay.
And let me tell you why. So Omeze, as a true freshman, as a wingback and a true freshman, already has 2 goals. Half of his shots have been on target. He's been a force on the back line, too. His feet have been incredibly quick. This is a guy that is a blessing to Syracuse. You talk about some of the guys that have come from Canada, like him, in years past, where they've been terrific, like Levante Johnson, for example, and so many other great Canadian players that have played on this team. Well, he's just the next installment of that. He's already got, in a couple of games, 2 goals under his belt from that wing-back spot, a country that produces great wing-backs like Alphonso Davies. And he played on the national team, the U17 national team, just like Alphonso Davies. This is a special player that didn't get a lot of attention before the season, but I think Omeze now, I think he's the 3rd best athlete so far this year on campus on the men's side of things. I want to move quickly, though, into your number 2. Who do you got in the 2 spot?
I've got Oronde Gadsden, and I understand how putting him above Trevor Pena, if you're just looking at these 2 games, but I'm projecting. I'm projecting for the future. I think Oronde Gadsden is still going to finish with way more yards, and I think more touchdowns. I think he beats out Trevor Pena for touchdowns this season. And it's also like, okay, if you're looking at this from a pro perspective, who is going to be drafted higher, when it comes down to it? I mean, is Trevor Pena going to be drafted? I mean, Oronde Gadsden is getting NFL-level hype. He's like a Kyle Pitts. He's like an Isaiah Likely. He's one of these big tight ends that you can put in as the slot, as like a wide receiver too. And he is going to step up more and more when the better opponents come around. They're going to lean on him more and more, and I think that's what you're going to start to see.
You know what? I agree with that, and I think he's been great through the first couple games of the year. For some reason, I just hold him to a higher standard. I'll actually take him out of my, or rather, he wasn't in my rankings. I had him at number 6 because I'd had Allen at 7. I'd move him into that 5 spot because I've been impressed, by Kalukian a little in that 5 spot. I'll actually take him out. My rankings have changed here on the fly due to your great example. My number 2 is such a solidified number 2 for me because I am in love with what this guy has done through the first 2 weeks. Fadil Diggs has been incredible. You talked about in Ohio, he really didn't, or against Ohio, he really didn't show up in the way that you thought he would on the stat sheet. Well, that didn't matter. He was still terrific. If you watch what he did in that game, I mean, he has got some of the best pass rush moves that I have seen from an ACC player in a very, very long time. He's got absurd strength. He's got decent edge bend, but his ability to use his power, transfer his weight and his feet, and not to mention then the versatility to move him to a Mike linebacker, to a guy that's playing at the second level, an inside guy, and to stop the run, he leads the league, or rather the FBS, in tackles for loss right now with 6. That is a very, very high mark to set through just 2 games. He has been phenomenal so far. Had 4 in that game against Ohio. I think just overall, Fadil Diggs has wowed me in unbelievable ways so far. He's a guy that will get drafted, in my opinion, for sure. One of, in my opinion, 3 guys that'll get drafted from Syracuse minimum this year. And I'm sure, Ryan, for your number 1 spot, you have a guy that most likely will get drafted this year.
He's on his way. He's on his way. Right now, if he keeps playing the way he does, from a signal caller's perspective, he will be there. It's Kyle McCord.
Of course.
What more can we say? What
He's
more
incredible.
can we say? Do you think that this past, and I'm assuming he's your number 1 as well?
Yes, he's my number 1.
Do you think this could have possibly gone better?
No, right now,
I do not think it could possibly have gone better.
You think back, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, of some of the plans that Syracuse football had in the offseason of, all right, who are we going to have for coach next year? Who are we going to have for the quarterback next year? And the idea of Dan Mullen was coming up. Kurt Cignetti was coming up, who's now with Indiana. And you were like, maybe those are better options, more, proven options than Fran Brown. What he did to then get the job and then bring in Kyle McCord, who now 735 yards, that's fourth in the FBS, 8 passing touchdowns this morning before the Texas State game that happened, well, I guess yesterday morning before it happened last night. That led the FBS. So right now, he's been fantastic. That'll do it for our men's rankings. Our women's rankings, though, pretty important right now. The 5 spot, for me, was up for very heavy debate. Ryan, I want to start with you, though. Who do you have in that 5 spot?
Yeah, we're kind of under the gun, so we'll go through it quickly. But I have Ava Palm.
Okay.
Double-digit kills in all but one game for Syracuse. She's got 102. And this volleyball team is one of these teams where, I mean, we wouldn't think much of because of what happened last year, but you know, it kind of got painted in a bad light because when Coach Bake got the job to start off the season, right, or to start off his Syracuse career, he had veteran leadership like Polina Shimanova that he could really lean on. They lost a lot of those players. They didn't have the same recruits because he's a newer coach. He's trying to establish himself, but they got the recruits that come down the line and stuff like that. And this team has been a lot better, off to a 6-0 start. They'll be competitive in the ACC, although the ACC for volleyball is very good.
Exactly. Right now, this team has 6 wins. Last year, they had 2, and I believe 2-26 was the official record last year. So this team has turned on a dime. For me, Bo Van Kempen in this spot. 3 goals in 3 games for the field hockey team. SU, a team looking to make a little bit of a resurgence after kind of a down year last year. 3 goals and 1 assist for Van Kempen. In the 4 spot, though, and I'll start with myself, very partial to women's soccer, love covering women's soccer last year, and now this year they've been on an absolute tear. In my 4 spot, I have Erin Fleury, 3 goals and an assist through the first 9 games. I mean, she was so solid last year. She comes back, and she's even better this year.
Yeah, I've got Hattie Madden, 1 goal, 1 assist so far on the season. Last year, had 6 goals and assist. That field hockey team is really good. Suffered a very tough loss to Ohio State, but they'll still be back on track, and they've been perennially in the NCAA tournament.
I agree. In my 3 spot, you mentioned Ava Palm earlier. I have Ava Palm in that 3 spot because of what volleyball has done, and now 6-0 on a start to the season. Ava Palm, 102 kills. That's top 50 right now at the Division I level. She's been great. If you look a little higher on the list, sorry, you're 3. I almost cut you off. My bad.
No worries. I understand. We're flying through it. I've got Erin Fleury. The type of offensive load that she had to carry last season was a lot for this women's soccer team that's also been off to a very good start. Just a couple games back, they suffered a tough loss to SMU the other night, but just a couple games back, 2016, that was their best start since then. I've got Wilhelmine Bogert, who currently leads the field hockey team in points at number 2. And I went with Shea Vanderbosch at number 1. I have a feeling you did too.
I did. Now, I never included Bogert in my top 5. She was just outside at the number 6 spot. I think Bo Van Kempen has been a great addition to this team. I also think a great addition on the women's soccer side, Ava Uribe, and what she's done this year. It has not showed up on the stat sheet, but last year when the team went 2-14-2, all you heard from head coach Nikki Thrasher Adams was, well, we don't have Ava Uribe. Well, we don't have Ava Uribe. And the whole time I was thinking, well, how much can Ava Uribe really do? Ava Uribe...
A lot is the answer.
Ava Uribe has some of the best touch I've seen from a college soccer player. Her passing is incredible. 4 assists, and she's also scored 2 goals.
I want to give a quick shout out. We went through the men's rankings. Neither of us mentioned Tomas Hutt. He made a save at the end of that Boston College game that was absolutely fantastic. Out of the 5 games they played up until that point, he played all 450 minutes, 90 minutes every single game in the 5 games. He played all 450 minutes to get them there.
I don't know if I'm giving him an honorable mention. I don't know.
He definitely deserves an honorable mention.
I don't know. Some performances from him have been a little subpar, but I think the goalkeeper on the other side, Shea Vanderbosch, for the women's team, I mean, unbelievable. Vanderbosch last year was definitely the best player in Syracuse women's sports other than Deasia Fair. I think Vanderbosch certainly had that title. And then this year, 102 shots faced, only 7 goals allowed. Well, we really hope you enjoyed this sports night here. No game this week, so you'll have to catch us next week for Stanford and Syracuse. Again, that game is at 7:30 with countdown to kickoff at 7, and then the double overtime after that one up until 12:30 a.m. We're taking you way late on September 20th. All right, well, for Ryan Bridges, I'm Hudson Ridley. We had Skylar Wilkes joining us earlier in the show. A couple thank yous to hand out. Our producer, AJ Myers, our engineer, Jordan Leonard, and our WAER Sports Talk desk, John Boncio and Dan Papillo, saying so long. And we hope you join us for the next Sports Night on WAER Syracuse. Have a great night.